You're welcome back to Morning Express. Now let's have Mr. Seun Oni join us virtually, the editor of the Daily Courier, editor in chief of the Daily Courier. A very good morning to you, Mr. Seun. Thank you so much for availing yourself for this discussion.
Good morning. Always a delight to be here. And how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you yourself?
Great, thank you.
All right. Well, let's start off with the labor war that has been raging in the country. Uh, Dangote refinery, Peng at some point, and now Pengerson. And even though it seems that the outcome of this war is still a little bit shady, Nigerians are still suffering in terms of queuing up for cooking gas, particularly, which has skyrocketed to over 2,000 naira. I think 2,200 naira as at the last time I checked. And queues are already beginning to form in Lagos, in Abuja, in certain parts of the country. What do you make of the entire situation? And of course, Pengerson's insistence of certain things that the Dangote refinery is not okay with.
Thank you. It was a needless face off between Pengasin and the Dangote refinery. Needless in the sense that the signs were there, and like we say in this climb, it takes two to tango. Dangote refinery, of course, has its own blame, why Pengasin as an association had always, and like many of his other allies, like the Nupeng and a few others, I really don't see the reason why a tool like strike, which is meant to be the last resort, is often the first tool in industrial dispute engagement. That still beats my imagination. Why we have a lot of these organizations resort to strike, especially in a very sensitive industry like the oil and gas industry. Like you rightly mentioned, the issues have been resolved. The two parties have moved on, but the aftermath of the 24 hours disruption is still lingering. I was privileged to buy a kg of gas just about 2 days before the strike. I drove myself to the gas station and I got it for 1,200. And a few days later, a neighbor went and I was told this for 1,700. And it rose to as high as 1,900, 2,000 naira per kg in some areas. We are glad that the NMPC came out yesterday to let us know that the spike in price was artificially induced by the middlemen who actually saw the disruption in the supply chain. And of course, we are aware that it will take a few days before the normal supply chain returns to normal. And that's what we are experiencing. But we can actually avoid this, prevent this in the future to ensure that government puts its boot on the ground, telling both parties that when industrial dispute as this arises in the future, the legal industrial dispute reconciliatory tools like negotiation and a number of other ones are actually, especially the ADR tools, are exhaustively before there is a result to what we experienced last week, where Pengasin directed his branches to turn off the nose of the gas to Dangote refineries. They shut down major government offices for something as simple as our members have been sent, have been sacked from Dangote refinery. I really think that should not become a national uh, a national headache. It's something that just locking yourselves in a room with someone as a mediator, we could have resolved this, and we don't go through this very harrowing experience as a nation.
Now, Mr. Seun, individuals like the Vice President, Senator Kashim Shettima, and Senator Adams Oshomole, who at some point was the leader of the NLC in the country as well, have voiced out their concerns over this and have thrown their weight behind Dangote and the Dangote refinery, citing the billionaire businessman's immense contributions to the GDP of Nigeria in various sectors of the economy. And also stating that this $20 billion refinery is a national asset that should be supported and not sabotaged in the way that these unions are doing at the moment. What is your own analysis of the entire situation, and what is your own verdict? Are you siding with the vice president's led support for Dangote, or are you with the unionists who are saying, why will you sack our members from your refinery?
If I will be honest, I think the jury is out already, and the vice president, in my opinion, if you also include the former Labour leader, who is now a senator of the Federal Republic, their statements, in my opinion, had simply made them a part of the problem, because these are individuals that you expect that should be able to step into a mediatory or reconciliatory shoes in the future. Those type of statements, in my opinion, they're a bit of grandstanding, but the jury is out. Nigerians really don't want any labor union, whether it's the bigger labor houses, the TUC, the NLC, or their affiliate, to hold the country by the jugular. The jury is out. Everyone frowns at it. But having said that, it is also tried to note, if I may just flip the vice president's submission at the NSC meeting yesterday, that also NES rather, the Nigeria Economic Summit meeting yesterday, that in the same vein, Nigeria is bigger than the Dangote refinery, the same way it's bigger than Pengasin. I think it's inappropriate for any industrialist to just wake up in one fuel soup to disengage hundreds of his employees on issues that can actually be dealt with using his own corporate policies. I think if some of the news we heard about those initially disengaged Pengasin members were right, internal mechanism of the company ordinarily should have dealt with it. But I think it was bile against Pengasin that was taken too far. Having said that, I was also very clear in my earlier submission that Pengasin has no right at all. It has a right to associate as an organization, but it has no right to put us through the harrowing experience that Nigerians are going through now. It has no right unilaterally, because he wants to make money for his association, to increase the price of fuel in the way and manner it has been doing over the years. I think, to use the right word, that's national sabotage.
Talking about this sabotage. Talking about this sabotage, Mr. Seun Oni, and also the sacked workers from Dangote refinery, the over 800 sacked workers. One of the core issues or concerns that the Dangote refinery had raised was that if these workers join the unions that have already had a track record of sabotage in the way that they have done to NNPCL, it's not news that unionism in Nigeria sometimes can cripple such systems. Now, this is a businessman, a staunch businessman, a capitalist who has set up his own business for profit. And then you have these workers who want to join a union that at any point in time, the union can tell them, you know what, down tools, shut down the refinery. We want this man to do this. And if he doesn't do it, then you shut down. That is what Dangote Refinery does not want. And that is why it's insisting that these members must not join the unions that are known and have a track record of sabotage, economic sabotage.
Now, I actually get the angle you are coming from. But you must also understand that no company, according to the labor laws that have also been codified in our country, has that right to just wake up and sack his employees on the account of unionizing. No corporate organization has that. And that was why I alluded earlier that is standard operating procedure and some internal workings ordinarily would have prevented this. For instance, I could recollect that one of the major standard operating procedure is that if you find a staff culpable in whatsoever way, in a manner that you think will affect the sustainability, profitability, or the image of a company. For instance, there is something as maybe 3-leaf suspension, and you say you are putting them through administrative inquiries. That would have been better understood, all right? And so you take that 3 months, you beat off the initial attacks, especially when it's around issue of unionism. That 3-month period now give you opportunity to really know the intention of the people concerned. You know, we've had rumors about a certain WhatsApp group where anti-Dangote activities, embers of anti-Dangote activities were being fanned. If you have done the 3 months, it would have given you a leeway to gather enough evidence to nail these guys. But when you just wake up and hundreds of staff, you just tell them to start going home and you tell them we are going to pay you your severance package and stuff like that, it doesn't work. It only works in a banana republic. And I've heard people try to justify that by saying he invested billions of naira. Yeah, he invested billions of dollars in setting up the refineries. Yes, he did that. Also having at the back of his mind that he will play by the rules. And part of playing by the rules is that you can't just sack people because they are unionizing. And if you see any reason why they are unionizing would have adverse effect on your company, it's just fit and proper, using your own standard procedures and administrative documentation to see how to nip that in the bud. And I think that's one area they need to go back, have a rethink. How can we, from the point of hiring people, let them know clearly you can unionize, but when that will jeopardize our corporate existence, then X and Y would be the consequence, because every action certainly has consequence. And for me, that is where Dangote actually did not get it right. The other side was that we learned that hundreds of expatriates were hired in one fell swoop. And I'm surprised that many people have been silent about that part of Dangote refinery operation, because there is a department domicile in the Ministry of Interior called the expatriate quota. And the primary responsibility of that unit in the Federal Ministry of Interior is to ensure that no corporate body in Nigeria goes to bring in expatriates to occupy positions that we have qualified Nigerians to occupy. And we're really not saying anything because we need to ask questions. Does that mean that we don't have qualified Nigerians to man those places where Indians and some Chinese, like we learned, have been brought in to occupy? These are the things that we must also interrogate. And that's why I said that someone like the vice president just coming out is, in my opinion, just playing to the gallery, because the federal government also has a duty to ensure that there is no monopolistic tendency that become monstrous at the adverse effect of the larger economy. These are the issues. It
Now,
must be a fair game
now,
for the investor who had invested billions of his dollars, Nigerians on one side, and the labor union who are also active member of the Nigerian community.
Now, the labor union had accused Senator Adams Oshomole, of course, a former labor leader, of turning into an advocate of corporate operation. That he had turned into an advocate of corporate operation by supporting employers against workers' rights to freedom of association and peaceful action. They had recalled that Section 40 of the 1999 Constitution as amended, Section 9, Subsection 6 of the Labor Act, and ILO Conventions 86, 87, and 98 all guarantee workers the right to unionize without interference. Now, all of these indices put into place that the unions have highlighted. How do we put it into perspective and balance this scale in such a way that while these workers are allowed under so many provisions and laws to unionize and associate, we also don't sabotage and trump refineries or organizations like the Dangote refinery, which has now, even though it's a private enterprise, has now become a national asset and a thing of pride for Nigerians. Where do we draw the line and how do we balance the scale?
Thank you. That should be our focus, not the rhetorics that I've been hearing by highly respected, highly placed Nigerians and people who should even know better. We should not pander to emotion. We can actually get that balance. And how we get the balance is simple. Everyone should play by the rules. A Dangote refinery must play by the binding rules. You have cited a few of the ILO convention. We have codified it. We are signatory to those laws. What that means is that it's binding on any corporate entity that is operating within our borders. Pengasi, on the other side, they are Nigerians. They are also under obligations to obey Nigerian laws. And there is also the other variable, the variable of government agencies. In this case, I think it's the Ministry of Labor and Productivity. They have a statutory obligation to ensure that an industry like Dangote's, that has become, like you've said, more of a national asset, gets that timeous attention when issues like this actually surfaces, so that some of these issues that require conversation does not drag to the point of having industrial action. I think we have sufficient laws to protect labor unions and sufficient laws to protect the interests of investors. All we just need is that people play their own role, play their own part. I think if the minister had actually waded in on time, we shouldn't get to the point where the union have to hold the nation by the jugular. And for me, that's the conversation that we need to take seriously.
All right, Mr. Seun Oni, let's move on to yet another matter in the news this morning. It's over the alleged certificate forgery by Minister of Science and Technology Chief Uche Nnaji, who happens to be from Enugu State. There have been calls for his sack. There have been calls for a deep probe into this entire situation. Nnaji, on the other hand, is of the opinion that the executive governor of Enugu State, Dr. Peter Mbai, is behind his wolves and is witch hunting him. What do you make of the entire situation? A serving minister being caught up in such a scandal?
I think it's just true to actors and our clients. I just want to imagine for a second, if we had this issue in the US, the UK, or some of these advanced nations, the individual at the center of this whole charade would have resigned. But there is this holding to the straw of the average politician in our climb. And it's actually not just a sorry issue, it's a sordid issue. I think that man, Inaji, should have resigned by now. And if he chooses not to resign, I think in the next 24, 48 hours, the president should wait the beefsteak. It's embarrassing enough that our security agencies, especially the DSS, who is saddled with the responsibility of doing a background check on political appointees, failed at the point of clearance to observe the glaring mismatch in the credentials that he submitted. I learned he had a press statement yesterday, a press conference yesterday, where he sent some of his guns to come and address the media. Sadly, that is not the way to go. The right thing for Naji to do, Godfrey Naji, what he ought to do is to resign, clear his name. That is the right thing to do. That's the proper thing to do. And if he thinks he must hold on to that office to make any, what we call in Yoruba, to do shalaye, they should show him the exit. The investigation by Premium Times was actually conducted using the certificate he submitted to the Senate. And so I really don't know the explanation he wants to give in this instance.
Well, one of the explanations he had given is that he was not issued any certificate by the University of Nigeria and Nsukka, talking about UNN, and he had asked UNN to release his transcript. There's a lot of conflicting reports now. Is it that the minister had submitted a forged certificate? Is it that the university failed to issue him one? Or are we now expected to just fall back and rely on the transcript as a proof of his academic qualification that, led to his appointment as a minister?
It was not surprising when he sent his aides to speak to journalists on an issue that borders on forgery, that borders on the integrity of our apex security architecture, and permit me to also say our national pride. These are not in any way simple issues, like Minister Naji wants us to believe it. He has not come out to tell us that the certificate that he presented at the floor of the Senate, Premium Times, was unambiguous. The certificates were taken from the ones that he gave senators during his screening. And so to come out and be asking for transcript, I think for me is comical. You can ask for transcript to say, oh, I was there, it was only, UNN came out, it was only one course that he did not. But that means you have not satisfied the minimum requirement to be awarded a certificate. That's clear enough. In fact, that argument for me is so lame, because anyone who had gone through the 4 walls of the university is aware. I have classmates when I graduated from the University of Jos who stayed back 2 years, not because they failed many papers, but just on account of one single paper. I know some of my classmates who wrote econometrics from year 2 and did it like 2 times even in final year. The same course, they were rewriting it. I know some is operation research that they did not pass in one sitting. They had to write it two, three occasions. So there is no excuse he wants to give us. He should resign and save the nation. Just let us still maintain the little pride we have as a nation. We can't continue to have ministers, and it's even more it's even quite shameful that we are talking about the minister who is in charge of science, technology, and I think they added innovation, and he actually don't have a BSc degree, did not serve, and is everywhere. No. We shouldn't be dragged into this mud. This man should resign and let the security agency pick up the case from here, and not this go running to the judiciary. How they will run there and try to obtain one injunction or the other to frustrate the whole thing.
Now, talking about the judiciary, as embarrassing as this might be, as described by some individuals, the court hearing for this case is slated for November 10th. And the presidency says that it will only act after the court verdict. Should we say that Nigerians and people who are concerned in this case are well confident enough that the judiciary will deliver justice to this matter?
Please, can I get that position again?
I
miss your train of thought there.
Well, I was saying that the court hearing for this particular case is slated for November 10th. And the federal government, the presidency itself, has said that it will only wade in after the court must have given its verdict. I understand that the onus falls on the court to decide. But are Nigerians well confident of the courts to deliver justice in this case?
If the presidency actually says that, that means it's true to our nature. That we like political correctness far and above doing the right thing, because there is no other way you want to explain this. The university where he claimed he graduated from had actually written to say they never awarded him that certificate. And the press statement or the press conference that was held yesterday, you could see that quickly the vice chancellor of that respected university had been dragged into the arena of the petty fight just because they decided to do the right thing. And if the presidency is trying to tell us that they will only act, they are in this country and they are aware, whosoever issued that statement is aware that even cases that requires a bit more urgency will drag for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And so it's another way of saying we will just give our man, because he's a party man, a few more years so that we can ease him out of this first tenure of the administration. For any right-thinking person, that's simply the game plan. You just give him window to see through this first tenure. He will not come the second tenure after all, because he's not actually even among the high-flying ministers. So we don't expect to see him if they eventually win the 2027 election. But for me, that's the game plan, and it's sad.
Well, this is not the first time a public office holder is engulfed in such a scandal. We have seen certain state governors, or a particular state governor in Nigeria at some point. I wouldn't want to mention names now, but he was involved in something similar. And there have been so many other cases. At some point, a minister during the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari, had to resign and go back to the UK, and it has been occurring. What does this say to our transparency and accountability when it comes to how certain public office holders are appointed or elected in regards to academic qualification, and whether or not they are transparent enough when it comes to these things?
Yeah, then I think one major one that will come to mind. You say you don't want to mention name, but it was everywhere. The former Minister of Finance, Kemi Adeosun, was also embroiled in certificate forgery. Her own was better off. In the sense, I'm not saying forgery in any way is better off, but she graduated, went to some of the Ivy Leagues in the world, quite resourceful. In fact, her leaving office was one of the major reasons why the economy was practically on its knees, because the people drafted them really, by hindsight now, don't know their left from their right. But she was asked to leave, and eventually, when the investigation was concluded, it was actually found to be true that the NYC certificate she presented was a forged one. Even though having NYC or being a graduate was not actually a requirement for being a minister in Nigeria. It was never a requirement. But the fact that you included it and it was found to be forged, that makes it even a criminal issue. But in this instance now, he claimed to have a degree from UNN. It was discovered that UNN made it very clear they never awarded him that certificate.
Yeah.
His aides were coming out to say the university should release his transcript. How is transcript the same thing as having a degree from a respected school like UNN? That for me is the issue. And that the administration says they won't act on the court until the court. What if the court says it was a forged certificate and he appeals? So they will wait until the appeal runs its full course. We have seen this type of shenanigans in government before, and like I did mention, it's simply politicking. But there must always be a limit to politicking. This borders on our national pride. We can't have a minister of science and technology who could not fulfill the minimum requirement to be awarded a first degree in the university, went ahead to forge NYC certificate, are still running around. I think he loses legitimacy the moment that investigation exposed the unfortunate scenario he had found himself. So if it were to be in other crimes, that very day, we've had simple issues like I could still recollect the cabinet minister that was shown the exit in the UK just a few months ago. She was one of the people campaigning that rent should be moderate. And it was discovered she was charging higher, more like a premium fee for her apartment. And the news was leaked. And that same day, she resigned.
Interesting.
Because that was even more of a moral issue. But here we are talking
it was
about
more of a moral issue than a forgery
ramification.
issue. Yeah, carry on, please. Your thoughts.
But we are talking about something that is not just a moral burden, but that has a criminal ramification, because forgery is a criminal offense in our legal jurisprudence. And the presidency is saying, no, we allow the court. No, we shouldn't allow the court. Let him resign as a normal citizen, use his money to run through the whole legal process, and let's see the outcome.
All right, Mr. Seun Oni, quite a very brilliant assertion you've made over this issue. We have just about 5 minutes to wrap up the discussion on Morning Express today. Let's turn our attention to yet another concern in the news. The Senate, we hear, is set to, counter the narrative that Christians in Nigeria are currently undergoing a religious genocide. Now, if you recall that American Senator Ted Cruz, had, during a recent podcast appearance with American talk show host Bill Hammer, alleged that Christians were being systematically targeted and killed in Nigeria, while particularly describing the situation as a genocide. What is your own position concerning this matter?
Well, I'm going to speak to it from two angles. First, from the lack of patriotism within the country, and secondly, the unfortunate North-South global dichotomy that, in my opinion, seems to give those in the global North that head boy, senior brother, and in some extreme case, some political scientists have called it master-servant relationship. What can be more genocidal than what is going on in Gaza under the not just covert, overt support of the United States? And we have not seen any of their senators bring to their plenary, speak loudly to condemn it. The few people who had actually spoken about it mostly are people of color or some who got nationalized from that part of the world. They are the only ones who have been vocal. They did not see the genocide that has led to over 61,000 deaths since this whole issue happened. They did not see that as a genocide. They have vetoed all the people. Every member of the Security Council had called the things going on in Gaza genocide. It's only US that has vetoed it among the superpowers. That is on one side. We now have a group of people that election that will ordinarily produce a winner and a loser. It's like a competition. You have several people on the relay race. Eventually, there will be someone who will be first to brace the tape. And what we usually see is that those who came second, third, and even the man who came last will go and embrace other people because there is another time. The World Athletic race that happened the last time, we saw Savelle from Jamaica. He came fifth, went to fourth, was consistently for a few years, but eventually he got gold this time around. That you lost an election now doesn't mean you can't win some other time. But since they've lost election, they've hide under the rhetorics of speaking truth to power to completely present themselves in the most unpatriotic manner you can imagine. So one of the scripts is to push the narrative that Christians are going through systematic genocide in Nigeria. It was pushed from here. It was not outsiders who said it. It was pushed from here. And it's quite unfortunate. I'm a Christian myself, not just a Christian. I'm a pastor of a church. And to use that word genocide in the context of what's happening in Nigeria, I think is quite unfortunate, quite unpatriotic, and I can tell you, that majorly the narrative was pushed by people who've lost an election, but instead of preparing for the next political race that is coming, have chosen to be sore losers and want to drag the entire nation into their red pile. And it's unfortunate.
Well, Mr. Seun Oni, you have quite indeed put the nail on the coffin. We must thank you so much. This has been a very engaging discussion on Morning Express. Always a delight and a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you so much for having me, and do have a beautiful day ahead.
Thank you, and you too. Well, that has been Mr. Seun Oni, the editor-in-chief at the Daily Courier, speaking to us on matters of national interest in the news this morning. We'll take a break. When we come back, we hope to open up the second leg of discussions on Morning Express with more in-depth analysis. Do well to stay with us.